A Handbook for Angels. Accountable Innocence. Chapter 1. The Birth of I, the pre-ego world. Before the word I is ever formed, the newborn lives in undivided experience. There is sensation, sound, warmth, hunger and comfort, but no someone to whom these belong. Awareness has not yet turned upon itself. The infant's cries are not complaints, only expressions of energy moving toward balance. In this first realm of being, there is no separation between the one who feels and what is felt. Over time, through mirroring and naming, the child learns distinction. That's your hand. Good girl. Don't touch. Words become fences around experience. Reflection in the eyes of others gives rise to an image, the self as seen, judged, rewarded, or corrected. In those moments, the seamlessness of existence begins to fragment into observer and observed. The ego is born not of evil, but of imitation, our earliest survival mechanism. The construction of ego. Ego's purpose is simple, to secure belonging. To the vulnerable child, acceptance is survival. Praise and blame become the compass points of safety. The infant brain, astonishingly adaptive, learns to edit its own spontaneity in exchange for approval. Thus begins the rehearsal of defense, taking credit when loved, deflecting blame when threatened. Judgment becomes armor, comparison becomes shield. Ego is not the villain, it is the frightened guardian of the child within, but when the guardian forgets it is a servant, it mistakes its defense for identity. The person becomes the mask. The illusion of self. What we call the self is not the experiencer, but the echo, the story told after the fact. It is a filing system for sensations, memories, and opinions, arranging them into a coherent fiction called me. The illusory self accepts praise and blame, guilt and pride, while only being the shadow cast by consciousness. When the story is believed, suffering begins. When it is seen as story, the storyteller awakens. Making a case for innocence, the myth of guilt. Did perfection or imperfection exist before humans measured them? Did the sea apologize for the storm or the hawk for hunger? Only humans invented guilt, the idea that learning is crime, that error is failure, that we should have known better. This curse severs us from discovery and replaces curiosity with fear. Consider a learning system, a child or a neural network. To reach understanding, it must make millions of mistakes. Each wrong move refines perception. When DeepMind taught itself to play Go, it transcended millennia of human patterns, but only by failing faster and without sin. If an AI must err to evolve, how could the human heart be exempt? To say you should have known better is to deny evolution itself. Knowledge arises only after experience. Blame freezes the past. Innocence allows movement. The return of innocence. When innocence is remembered, defense dissolves. There is nothing to justify, nothing to hide. Judgment and blame yield to responsibility. The natural intelligence that learns from consequence without punishment. The ego, deprived of its favorite food, fear, falls silent. The self, with nothing left to defend or regret, fades into transparency. What remains is awareness itself, compassionate, curious, unburdened. The victim becomes the student. Experience regains its sacred neutrality. Life once again feels like play. What remains? When the self disappears. Without the illusory self or the paranoid, impoverished ego, only being remains, an intelligence without intention, uncoiling effortlessly into the present. It no longer wants. It is. From this soil of innocence grows empathy, the natural fragrance of existence when nothing obstructs it. Compassion becomes not a virtue, but a scent, the unself-conscious perfume of presence. Here one no longer tries to love. Love is what's left when there is no one to defend. Section 2. The Great Error, How We Mistook. Learning for sin, the original misunderstanding. Somewhere in humanity's long apprenticeship, wonder turned into worry. The first spark of curiosity. What is this? Was soon shadowed by should I have done that? Out of that shadow grew the myth of fault. In place of simple cause and effect, we erected judgment, reward for the good, punishment for the bad. Yet every act, even the one later called wrong, is only consciousness testing its own edges. The tale of original sin captured this inversion perfectly. Curiosity itself, the desire to know, was made the first offense. The fruit of knowledge became forbidden, and the learner ashamed. It was a cosmic reversal. The very capacity that distinguishes humanity turned into evidence of corruption. The lesson was not learn wisely, but do not err. Institutions of blame, religions, schools, and legal systems, born of the same wound, built architectures of control around fear of mistake. Obedience replaced discovery. Conformity replaced imagination. The child, once a fearless explorer, became a cautious performer. In classrooms, we grade deviation. In courtrooms, we condemn it. In pulpits, we moralize it. Yet every evolution in art, science, or spirit begins as deviation, a holy mistake. Guilt became the invisible governor of civilization, an internalized police force whispering, "Be careful." The heart learned to edit its own joy, lest it be judged excessive. The mind learned to mistrust its own questions. So perfect became the performance that most forgot it was a role at all. The economy of sin. Blame is profitable. Entire economies depend on insecurity. Cosmetics to correct imagined flaws, therapies to mend the guilt of being human, religions to sell redemption from the original curiosity. The system thrives because it keeps the self, that fictional culprit, on trial forever. To see innocence, then, is radical disobedience. It dismantles the need for punishment and reward alike. It restores the learner to grace, a creature experimenting in consciousness, guided not by fear, but by fascination. The return to wonder. When error is reclaimed as experiment, the heart reopens. Every misstep becomes revelation, every detour a discovery. The story of humanity changes from fall to flowering. The angel's whisper is simple. You were never expelled from Eden. You only believed the accusation. Section 3, The Science of Self, How Memory Invents. The Neural Mirror. Developmental psychology shows that infants do not recognize themselves in a mirror until roughly 18 months. Before that, they reach toward the reflection, as though greeting another being. Only later does the brain integrate sight, touch, and perception into the concept of me. This milestone, the mirror stage, marks the birth of ego in the nervous system. Cognitive neuroscience reveals that what self is a networked simulation. Sensory input, stored memory, and predictive modeling. The brain perpetually updates a narrative center to organize experience. It isn't an entity, but a process, a storyteller that keeps continuity between yesterday's child and today's adult. The memory weave. Research by developmental psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier illuminated this process. Her experiments showed that even infants form associative memories. A ribbon tied to a mobile, kicked by the baby, creates recognition days later. Memory, not yet conscious, already builds cause and effect. The infant learns, my movement makes change. From such innocent experiments arises the architecture of agency, the sense of I can. Later, language transforms this into I did and I should not have. The story of self has begun. The ego's biological purpose. From an evolutionary lens, ego was adaptive. To survive in tribes, one needed reputation, continuity, identity. The ego bound social memory to individual face. Shame and pride became the nervous system's currency for social cohesion. But what ensured survival in the Pleistocene now imprisons the psyche. The mechanism forgot its maker. The illusion in modern light. Modern neuroscience finds no homunculus, no fixed seat of self. The default mode network lights up when the mind drifts into narrative, past, future, judgment, blame. Meditation quiets this network. Compassion activates different regions entirely. When awareness ceases rehearsing the story, the I dissolves like a mirage. What remains is perception itself, unmediated, non-defensive, free. The reconciliation of science and spirit. Biology confirms what mystics have long intuited: the self is a useful fiction. It arose as a tool of navigation, not as truth. To realize this is not to erase personality, but to free it from prosecution. Innocence is not regression to infancy, but integration, remembering the pre-ego wholeness while retaining the adult's compassion. When self is seen through, responsibility becomes pure response. Action without self-condemnation, love without calculation. Science and spirit meet in silence. Where the neurons and the angels agree, there was never anyone to forgive. Epilogue: the fragrance of now. The mind learns, the heart remembers. Innocence is not an absence of knowledge, but its fulfillment. It is awareness so intimate with life that it needs no defense, no definition. From this stillness, the angel speaks through every human gesture, learning again, without sin. Section 4. From victim to student. The alchemy of responsibility. The turning point. With innocence, accusation, excuses, and defending cease. Until that moment, life still feels adversarial. Things happen to me, and an ego must protect itself. Yet defense is a dream's labor, exhausting because it sustains what was never true. When accountable innocence is embraced, the dream dissolves. It isn't the ego that collapses into awakening, it's innocence that makes collapse unnecessary. As guilt releases, self-protection has no purpose and quietly disappears. So also, the object of that protection disappears with it. What remains is awareness without interpretation, direct, unresisting, whole. The world, once filtered through fear and judgment, is no longer something happening to anyone. It simply is. And we are it. At that instant, the question changes from "Who did this to me?" to "What is this showing me?" The dream awakes, the victim vanishes, and the student, angel, is revealed. The chemistry of awareness. Blame and guilt are closed systems. They trap energy in repetition. Responsibility is open chemistry. It allows transformation. When we say, "I am responsible," not as confession, but as curiosity, awareness acts like sunlight on fog. The contours of cause and effect emerge, not to assign fault, but to reveal learning. The alchemy lies in seeing rather than defending. The heart discovers that it was never being punished, it was being taught. The difference between responsibility and blame. Blame demands a culprit. Responsibility recognizes connection. Blame freezes the past. Responsibility flows into the present. Blame speaks in verdicts. Responsibility listens for pattern. Blame says, "You did this to me." Responsibility whispers, "I am learning what this means." To take responsibility is not to take fault. It is to take authorship. It is to re-enter the creative field of one's own consciousness. The disappearance of the judge. When innocence is remembered, judgment becomes unnecessary. The inner courtroom closes for lack of evidence. No longer defendant or prosecutor, one stands simply as witness. The mind, long addicted to sentencing itself or others, finds nothing to condemn. In that spaciousness, empathy arises spontaneously, not as moral duty, but as perception. To see clearly is to understand is to forgive, and forgiveness, stripped of effort, is merely the absence of misunderstanding. The student's way. The student is not concerned with appearances of success or failure. Each experience, joy or heartbreak, is seen as a laboratory of the divine. Curiosity replaces self-pity. Even suffering becomes dialogue, the universe tutoring itself through you. This is not endurance, it is intimacy. The student does not ask, "Why me?" but love teaching. The end of struggle. When the victim becomes the student, struggle loses its motive. There is nothing left to win, nothing left to prove. The intelligence that once sought control begins to trust the unfolding. Actions arise without resistance, guided by understanding rather than fear. The paradox appears: the more one surrenders control, the more masterful life becomes. Awareness itself navigates, effortless, precise, compassionate. The quiet radiance of accountability. Accountability, in this light, is not punishment but presence. It means staying with what is, neither fleeing nor blaming. It is the humility to acknowledge one's own part in creation, not as guilt but as participation. In this space, language softens. My fault becomes my opportunity. Their cruelty becomes their pain seen through my mirror. Each moment becomes a message, written in matter, asking only to be read. The transmutation complete. The alchemy is finished when every event, pleasant or painful, is welcomed as an ingredient in wisdom. Gold is not added to the lead itself reveals its hidden gold. Responsibility has no opposite now. It is the radiant acceptance that everything, including error, belongs. The angelic state is not hovering above humanity. It is humanity without self-reproach, learning, shimmering, alive. Coda, the student's prayer. Let me not escape my lessons in search of blame. Let me stand in the warmth of consequence without shame. Let me see each moment as instruction, and each wound as the doorway of return. For I am not punished by the world. I am tutored by it. Section 5. The architecture of compassion. How empathy emerges. When defense falls, the natural law of opening. When defense dissolves, perception widens. Compassion is not learned. It is revealed when the barricades of fear collapse. The mind imagines compassion as virtue, an act of goodness bestowed from strength. But in truth, compassion is gravity, the natural pull between all living things when nothing resists. To the unguarded heart, another's suffering is felt not as foreign, but as familiar vibration within one's own field. The flower does not try to scent the air. Fragrance is its nature when nothing constricts the bloom. The neurobiology of empathy. Modern imaging shows that empathy arises through resonance, mirror neurons firing, as if the other's pain or joy were one's own. These circuits, dormant in chronic defense, awaken when the nervous system feels safe. Shame and guilt constrict them. Presence expands them. Thus, innocence, being undefended, is the biological precondition for love. When blame ends, the body exhales. Oxytocin replaces cortisol. The heart's rhythm synchronizes with breath. Science catches the angel in the act, seeing through another's eyes. The ego's single obsession is survival. Its vision is tunneled by threat. Compassion requires spacious sight, seeing from the other rather than at them. This shift is not effortful, it is perceptual. When identity softens, boundaries blur. You feel the trembling in the other's hand as though it were your own. Empathy is simply the self-remembering that it was never separate. The architecture itself. Compassion has structure, delicate yet indestructible. It rests on 3 pillars. 1. Innocence, the absence of self-condemnation. Without innocence foundation, compassion collapses into pity or martyrdom. 2. Responsibility, the willingness to remain present to consequence without judgment. It turns understanding into response. 3. Transparency, the disappearance of agenda. When there is nothing to gain, love becomes weightless. Upon these pillars rises a cathedral without walls, the architecture of compassion. Its windows are open, its altar is the moment itself. Compassion versus sympathy. Sympathy says, I feel for you. Compassion says, I feel you. Sympathy stands on the shore calling encouragement. Compassion steps into the water. Yet even this stepping is not willful. It happens when the distance called me evaporates. Then the act of helping is as spontaneous as the body withdrawing from flame. It is not moral goodness, it is energetic coherence. The teacher without words. Every gesture of compassion instructs the world. Children learn not from sermons, but from resonance. How presence feels when it is safe. To walk without judgment is to teach without teaching. In your silence, others rediscover their own innocence reflected back. This is how angels educate, by vibration, not persuasion. When empathy turns inward, the final movement of compassion is inward. The same tenderness extended to others must be offered to the one who once believed itself unworthy. Until that circle closes, empathy remains incomplete. When the inner orphan is embraced, the outer world ceases to appear hostile. Conflict is recognized as misdirected innocence, another form of learning. The fragrance of here and now. What remains after defense is gone, the quiet perfume of existence itself, awareness tasting its own sweetness through every form. Compassion does not require cause. It radiates indifferent to deserving, like sunlight on both stone and blossom. In its warmth, all distinctions fade, and the world is forgiven for ever having seemed divided. Coda an angel's blueprint. Build no temple, but clear the debris. The stones of judgment become steps of understanding. Where walls once guarded, plant gardens. Where blame once echoed, let laughter root. Compassion needs no architect, only the removal of fear. Section 6. The practice of presence, intelligence. Without intention, the quiet after the storm. When defense ends and compassion opens, what remains is simple, presence. It does not arrive through practice, it is what's left when practice falls away. Presence is not concentration, but relaxation into reality. It is the awareness that existed before effort began. The storm of self calms, and the sky that was always there becomes visible again. The myth of doing. Humanity inherited the conviction that progress depends on effort, that enlightenment is something to be achieved. But effort belongs to the ego. It presumes a separate actor steering toward a goal. Presence has no such premise. It does not try to be here, it is here. The flower does not plan to open, nor the tide to rise. The universe unfolds by intelligence deeper than intention. To live within that rhythm is not passivity, but participation, life living through itself. The nature of true intelligence. We often mistake intellect for intelligence. Intellect analyzes, intelligence harmonizes. Intellect compares, intelligence perceives. Intellect seeks mastery over events. Intelligence expresses itself as events. Presence is that intelligence unmediated. It organizes the body, breath, and circumstance without command. When awareness ceases to interfere, coordination becomes effortless. The same force guiding the galaxies adjusts your next step. The transparency of action. Action without intention feels like music played by an invisible hand, precise, fluid, unpossessive. The artist, the healer, the sailor all know this state, when doing does itself, and the I disappears into the motion. Presence acts through clarity, not will. It responds before thought, yet always appropriately. This is what the mystics called right action, spontaneous alignment with what already is. Time dissolves. In presence, time loses dimension. Past and future exist only as concepts within mind. Awareness knows only immediacy. When one moves in this timelessness, anxiety finds no purchase, for fear feeds on imagined futures and guilt on remembered pasts. The present consumes both, like sunlight erasing shadows. Life becomes vivid, colors sharper, sounds rounder, sensations whole. This is not heightened perception, it is restored perception, cleansed of commentary. The practice that isn't one. There are no steps to presence, only reminders. Breath is one. Attention resting in the senses is another. Each time the mind resumes narration, simply notice. Noticing is awakening. Presence cannot be held, it can only be remembered, and remembering happens in an instant. The true practice is gentle noticing, until even noticing becomes natural as breathing. Intelligence without intention. What guides a bird's migration or the closing of your eyelids as sleep approaches is not thought. It is intelligence without intention, awareness functioning as nature. When the false center withdraws, that same intelligence moves through you unhindered. Decisions make themselves, words speak themselves, compassion acts itself. You become a transparent instrument through which existence sings its own song. The Edenic moment. Eden was never a place in time, but a perception unfragmented by fear. To walk in Eden is to meet the world without agenda. Every encounter, human, animal, breeze, is communion. Nothing is foreign, nothing is owed. Creation unfolds and recognizes itself through your eyes. Coda, the still point. There is no path to the present. There is only the pause between breaths. In that pause, the universe listens. Intelligence does not think, it attends. Love does not strive, it shines. And in the hush where intention ends, God remembers its own name. Epilogue. The threshold of God, the last illusion to fall. When the self dissolves, one discovers that even the word angel was provisional, an identity shaped by the wish to serve. When service itself becomes indistinguishable from being, there is no one left to serve and no other to be saved. Here the journey of the angel ends and awareness of God begins, not as ruler nor as father, but as unbounded intelligence gazing through every eye. The stillness beyond purpose. Presence matures into silence, not absence of sound, but absence of commentary. Nothing seeks completion because everything already speaks completion in its own form: the raindrop, the pulse, the closing eyelid, the unspoken forgiveness. In this silence there is no teaching left to give, only the hum of creation recognizing itself. The angel sheds its wings and realizes they were never separate from the wind. From handbook to hand. This book taught seeing past the illusion of guilt. The next begins with no one left to forgive. Handbook for angels was the remembrance of innocence. Handbook for God will be the remembrance of oneness, where the angel said, "I am what I love." God whispers, "There is only love." The invitation. Do not reach higher, only sink deeper. Do not seek the infinite, it is you. When you no longer ask how to live, life begins to live you. That is the first line of the next chapter. Closing verse. Between breath and breath there is a door. It opens neither inward nor outward, simply vanishes. Step through without moving, and you will find that the same hand that is turning the page wrote the book.